Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print, the Force is with the readers, and we return to 1982 for The Return of Ben Kenobi. But not so much. I'm your host, Nathan P. Butler, and that is the title of the story we're looking at this time, The Return of Ben Kenobi. Now, we should bear in mind something here. Put this into context. This is 1982. This was a newspaper strip that ran from May 17th to July 25th of 1982. So we are still about a year away, just shy of a year away from Return of the Jedi. And we are already 2 years past The Empire Strikes Back. People know that Ben Kenobi did in fact die, and it was his spirit talking to Luke on Hoth and then on Dagobah. So we know what happened to Ben Kenobi. He died on the Death Star in A New Hope. But whereas the Marvel series has continued on after The Empire Strikes Back and is now filling in that gap between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, it will eventually be pinned down to be a 9-month gap. And yes, I'm taking credit for that. I was the one who pinned it down to a 9-month gap when we were working on the Essential Atlas, because you have essentially the issue of stories being told at one point in the Bantam era as being a certain amount after Return of the Jedi, like, say, the X-Wing books, 2.5 years after Return of the Jedi, then they start changing them to how many years after A New Hope, so all of a sudden those are 6.5 years after A New Hope. The only way to make both of them fit correctly and both of them be the same, 2.5 years after Jedi and 6.5 years after A New Hope, is for them to essentially be around the same time of the year. But if Return of the Jedi is in month 3, which I was able to actually pin down for the Atlas, and A New Hope is in month 3, what do we do with the fact that The Empire Strikes Back is in month 6? Well, we're just kind of stuck with that fact that it's in month 6. And broadly speaking, since this is around the time also that the idea was that the digital dating, the digital 35:something type dates, wound up being said to be, well, they're all 12-month dates, just like they were during the Clone Wars. It's just we never really tended to see months 11 and 12. With all that happening, it means there is a 9-month gap from month 6 to month 3. Now, what does that mean in the big grand scheme of things? It means there is this 9-month gap in which to tell stories like Shadows of the Empire later and like the Marvel series. Right now, the Marvel series is the only one trying to tackle this time period. The newspaper strips are still stuck in that era between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. They have not pushed forward. They will not push forward into that era. So instead, what we get is a story called The Return of Ben Kenobi that everyone in the audience realizes can't be true, but which has that name and might lead you to believe something that is kind of erroneous. Turns out they don't try in the story to make you think this really is Ben Kenobi coming back. It's a trap, obviously. It's a trap! But in being a trap, it is obvious, and we see both sides. We don't get to be surprised, quote-unquote, by it not being really Ben Kenobi. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, I suppose. Let me show you where you can find this thing. If you have the Russ Cochran set, this is in Volume 2. Starts on page 231, goes up to about page 260 in this set in the original form. It was, as with all these ones from the Archie Goodwin, Al Williamson era, it was released on StarWars.com's hyperspace section before it became a dumbed-down Pretty Pictures website. You can, of course, find this now in the pages of Classic Star Wars number 10, which is where it starts. This is actually an issue that begins at the beginning of this story, which is a rare thing. Usually they just kind of stop in the middle. And this story ends in the middle of an issue, as I was just saying, in issue number 11 here. We're hitting the halfway point of the classic Star Wars series that reprints these. And this ends actually with this panel up here in the top corner on, I believe it's about page 9 of this. This is the point where there's not page numbers down at the bottom for easy reference here. Suffice to say, it's another one that goes partway into an issue and then stops. You can find both of these in the pages of Classic Star Wars Volume 2, The Rebel Storm, the trade paperback, the middle trade paperback out of 3 that collects this particular classic Star Wars series. The idea here is simple. Darth Vader wants Luke Skywalker. He wants him captured, he wants to eventually lure him to the dark side, etc., etc. And the way he's going to do this is convince Luke that Ben Kenobi, Obi-Wan Kenobi, is back. So Vader has gone through some pretty impressive lengths to get an actor to play Ben Kenobi who essentially looks like Ben Kenobi. I mean, it's straight up Alec Guinness Kenobi from A New Hope here. Now, we are told that this is something that Luke believes, at least through much of the story, but we're actually told a reason why he is so believable. To me, it's like, really? Luke really thinks this really is Ben. That's a bunch of crap. No way does he actually think it's Ben, unless it's just wishful thinking and him essentially believing what he wants to believe. But they say here, Vader says, it makes deception difficult. That is, the fact that Luke can touch the Force. But old Obi-Wan, the man you impersonate, had little time to teach the youth. Skywalker's powers are unhoned. Given that, and all I and the Empire have provided to you, that is, to the actor, you cannot fail. To which he replies, forgive an actor momentary stage fright, sire. To which Vader replies, and again, this is in the classic Star Wars sort of editing of the scene, hear me, actor. Imperial surgeons have made your resemblance to Obi-Wan Kenobi perfect. My training, that is Vader's training, plus some technological trickery, makes that resemblance more than physical. And essentially, this means that Obi-Wan, this fake Obi-Wan, has a lightsaber. He also has some Imperial technology that lets him put up miniature force fields to block blaster bolts and such. Makes it look like he's using the Force. And of course, he knows his way across the terrain of the planet he's on because the Empire has set him up with it at that point. So he's pretending to be Obi-Wan, and he leads some attacks on Imperial resources that Vader says is fine because it sets up a good cover of why Ben is doing what he's doing. It makes Ben more believable. It establishes who he is. Luke hears about this from one of the survivors of one of these raids, and he goes rushing off to the planet Eridus, which is much like Tatooine, again, pushing this sense of familiarity to Luke, and he hooks up with this Obi-Wan imposter, who is essentially an actor with the role of a lifetime, though he will slowly begin to realize that Luke has this great affection for Ben Kenobi, that Luke has this great respect and reverence for Ben Kenobi, as do the Chubbits, these little, I say aliens, but the little natives of Eridus who are on the planet who are working with this fake Ben Kenobi against supposedly Imperial interests. He realized that that respect is not for him. It's for the man he is impersonating. And he slowly grows to sort of respect Ben Kenobi in absentia, and in doing so, he wants to act the way that Ben would have acted. By the end of the story, there's a trap that has been laid out. There is this huge tower on Eridus. Okay, kind of cool looking there. I actually think that the black and white version of it looks a little bit cooler, if you will indulge me. It's one of those cases where the color artwork almost blunts the impact of the art that we're getting within the story itself. And the original story artwork, yeah, it's black and white, but it's pretty nice. A lot more detail to the tower than it seems like we get when it's colored, because all that detail fades into the dark colors that are being used. So if I say there's this tower that's supposed to be the only way you could transmit off the planet. Super powerful transmitter, way up high, but the transmissions, the signals it sends off, are causing the Chubbits to lose control of their nervous systems over time, and they're dying. And they want to save the Chubbits, ostensibly, by taking down the tower. Of course, the tower is a trap. Vader races to get there by the time that Luke gets there, so that Luke and when Luke and this fake Ben come inside, they separate, and Luke winds up going to face Vader. Or at least that was the plan. Turns out, though, that the imposter says, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. I respect Luke. I respect the memory of Ben Kenobi, a man I've never met. I'm not going through this. I'm not going to let you destroy Luke Skywalker. Vader then force pushes him and knocks him down, sends some stuff flying at him. But in doing so, he's using the dark side overtly. Luke senses it instinctively and realizes he needs to be careful. Vader leaves the actor banged up pretty badly, but rather than being able to go face Luke, Vader is stopped when the actor reaches up, hits an overload button that also sends a signal to C-3PO, who's stowed away aboard the ship with Luke, thinking he was stopping R2-D2 from stowing away, who wasn't stowing away. And he signals C-3PO to come get Luke, and the overload causes a huge explosion that injures Vader, at least temporarily, but thankfully does not hurt Luke, because Luke was just out of its range because it exploded way up at the top of the tower and Luke wasn't quite there yet. Now, what makes this story to me have kind of a saving grace, because it seems so lame. Really? Impersonating Ben Kenobi. Luke's going to fall for that. Wow, how lame. But they don't try to make us think that Luke is an idiot. He seems kind of like an idealistic idiot at the beginning because he's just buying into this stuff, but again, maybe he's believing what he wants to believe. It's wish fulfillment for him in a lot of ways. And they use a lot of the technology and a lot of the surgery stuff to try to make this person really seem like he was Ben Kenobi. The Empire's done a very good job with this. After the explosion, Luke goes to the fallen actor who is never named anywhere else in the EU. We just know him as the Obi-Wan Kenobi actor or impersonator here. And the actor is on the ground dying and says, "Luke, I started the power overload in the upper levels, hoping the blast wouldn't reach you." Luke replies, "You were right. I wouldn't be here otherwise, Ben." To which he replies, at hearing the name Ben, "Surely you've realized I'm not your old mentor, just an imposter who came to love the part. Only hope I played it well." And that's well as he's dying, so the well kind of dips down. So like, I only hope I played it well, as it's like falling out of the word balloon there. So Luke essentially, he realized that this wasn't really Ben. He's not an idiot, but he appreciates the sacrifice the man made, and he's been able to escape Vader, so it's kind of an all's well that ends well kind of thing for Luke. The actor has died, sort of paying the price for his part in the deception. They can only hope that Vader was killed or injured, but of course, you can't keep Vader down for long, especially not with something that's in a comic rather than in a movie. So it's a story that sort of was misleading by its title. It seems a little lame in its premise. It seems like maybe it's not quite as believable as it should be, but for the time period and for the reasons given in here, which aren't really as detailed as we would expect today, but again, we didn't expect as detailed of reasonings back then, it should have played well back in 1982. These days, you read it and you're kind of groaning partway through it, but at least it's serviceable if you read the entire thing as opposed to just going by its premise. But certainly not something that I think would probably be produced today, at least not without a whole lot more explanation to, technologies and such to try to make someone look like Obi-Wan. Perhaps maybe we would have seen a shapeshifter doing it, not an actor with surgery, for example. In any event, interesting little tale, certainly not one that I would return to very often, and certainly, as we usually say, is it an essential read? No, it is not an essential read. It is not, by any means, an essential tale. But if you're reading it back then, I think this probably would have been exciting to audiences in 1982. I'll give them credit for that. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with the readers.